Welcome back to the Aubergine Chef. Today we'll be making a gelatin cream pie dessert called Kahlua White Russian Pie. Now if you know your cocktails, Black Russians are basically just vodka and Kahlua. And to make a White Russian, you add milk to it. But it's actually a relatively easy dessert. There's a couple of steps that we need to do to get to where we need to be, because we're adding a lot of volume into the egg yolks, into the whipped cream. But overall, it's a pretty easy pie, and it requires very little baking, especially if you use a pre-made crust. Now we're actually going to make the crust from scratch. We're going to make a cookie crust, and I'm using Teddy Grahams, chocolate Teddy Grahams, but feel free to use Oreo crumbs or whatever crumbs you want. I strongly recommend using chocolate, of course. And what we're going to do is we're going to add up to 2 ounces. I'm only going to add 1 ounce of melted butter, cooled to room temperature. You don't want to add it really, really hot. And we're also going to add 1 egg white. We can add a little bit less if we want, but or you can just leave it out altogether. But I really strongly recommend using the egg white because it makes the crust stronger and a little bit crispier too. And what we're going to do is we're going to pre-bake it, since we're not baking the Kahlua filling. So you want to make sure that your crust is already baked and ready to go. So I'm going to use about a 9 to 10 inch, I think this is a 9 inch, it's a 9 inch pie tin. So it's made out of glass, it's a Pyrex glass. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill it up and we're going to bake it at 375 degrees. So I'll show you how to do that. In this bowl, I have about 6 ounces of, like I said, chocolate Teddy Graham crumbs. And what I did was I took some Teddy Grahams, and I stuck it in my food processor, and I just blended it all up until it was nice and fine and crumbly, powdery. You can do it as fine as you like or as chunky as you like. It's up to you. And make sure you sift through it with your hands and find any chunks of unground up teddy bear cookies. And then what you want to do is you want to either process them again or toss them or eat them or whatever. You just don't want to have any just random chunks in there because it won't make a nice solid pie crust. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add our remaining ingredients and toss them together. And I'll show you how to separate an egg. Alright, now to separate an egg, just lightly crack it open and then just let the egg white drip down from the shell, and you just pass the yolk back and forth and letting more of the egg white drip down. Oops, I broke the yolk. That's okay. So we don't really need to worry about how clean it is this time because we're not making a meringue. So if you break a little bit of yolk into your egg white, it's fine. I'm going to go ahead and add that right to my crumbs and put the egg yolk here because we're going to need it for later. Then we're going to go ahead and add in the 1 ounce of butter. And we're just going to mix it all together until the crumbs are nice and moistened and everything is evenly mixed. So whenever you make a cookie or a graham cracker crust, what you're basically doing is breaking up the cracker or the cookie and then putting it back together and making a giant cookie. So it's kind of, if you think of it that way, the ingredients kind of make sense of why we're using them. Because a lot of recipes like cake that use cake crumbs or bread crumbs that are incorporated into like a cake or some other finished product, it's because it already contains the finished product. It contains flour and the sugar and salt and all other things. So it's kind of like using a pre-made cake and just putting it back together again. So that's what we're kind of doing here, except we're doing it with a pie shell instead of a cake or a bread or whatnot. Now, you know, most recipes don't use entirely all of that stuff, but if you're ever wondering why something says, why does this cake recipe ask for cake crumbs? That's why. And you can always use that trick if you have cake in the freezer or whatnot and you're short on ingredients. So like if you're making a cake and you find that you're actually a little low or you ran out of flour or whatnot, instead of running to the grocery store, just throw in a couple cake crumbs or a few cake crumbs, and that'll make up the rest of the volume that you need. So just take your mixed crumbs and push them into your pie shell, nice even layer, all the way up to the edges. Alright, once you have all your crumbs pressed in really good, nice and packed, make sure you get in the little crevice here, the corner, if you will, and make sure it's nice and pressed down, especially against the edges too. And what we're going to do is we're going to bake this at 375 degrees, 5 to 8 minutes, until it's basically done and it feels like a cookie again. It won't always be hard or dry, but it's going to be nice and solid looking. Okay, so the next few steps, you all want to have all of your ingredients ready to go. You don't want to be having to stop in between each time. So you want to make sure you have 2 egg yolks in a separate bowl, you have 4 egg whites in another separate bowl, and you have 4 ounces of heavy cream in this bowl. You also want to have 1/4 ounce or 1 package of gelatin blooming in 2 ounces of cold water. and go ahead and bloom that in a little pot, and I'll show you why in a little bit. So the first thing you want to do after you get all those steps together is you want to go ahead and whip up your heavy cream. Okay, so we're about medium to soft peaks actually, and I'm going to go ahead and undermix it just because we're going to set it up in the refrigerator. So scrape this into a separate bowl, wash it out, and then wipe it down with a little bit of vinegar. Now you can skip this step by you can skip using the mixer by whipping up the heavy cream by hand if you'd like, so you don't have to wash it again. But you want to make sure to wipe it out with a little bit of vinegar because we're going to be whipping up egg whites, and I'll explain why when we're whipping up the egg whites. Okay, so the next step is to take your egg yolks on a double boiler. Now I'm using 3. Normally you would want to use 2, but I had broken quite a few eggs, so I decided to make use of the extra egg yolk. Then add in 1½ ounces of granulated sugar, and immediately start whisking them together because the granulated sugar can chemically cook the egg yolks, and you don't want to have any hard pieces in there. Then you just want to continuously whisk this and whip up some air and get this pretty much to ribbon stage. Now if you're doing a large batch, of course you can use a hand mixer, but because it's just such a small amount, you're going to have to probably do it by hand. So meanwhile, while you're whipping up your egg yolks on the pot where we bloomed our gelatin, remember it's a 1/4 ounce of gelatin with 2 ounces of cold water. We let that sit for a couple minutes in order to allow the gelatin to bloom or hydrate. And then I went ahead and melted it over low heat. I didn't really have to stir it or anything like that because it was very nice and evenly distributed in the water, so there was no chunks. But you want to make sure there's no granules or chunks in the finished gelatin. You want to make sure that it's almost like water when you're finished with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to add that to the egg yolks. Okay, so once your egg yolks reach ribbon stage, or pretty close to it, you should be able to kind of allow the yolks to build upon itself, creating ribbons. Now I could probably whip this for a little bit longer, but it's such a hard thing to do with such a small amount and such a big whisk. I don't have any little whisks. But if you want to, you can go ahead and beat it for a little bit longer and it'll become a little bit thicker and a little bit lighter and airier, have more volume. So anyway, once you get to ribbon stage with your egg yolks, you want to go ahead and add in your melted gelatin. Just go ahead and whisk it in. And then you want to go ahead and add in your flavorings. I've got a teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1 ounce of vodka, and 1½ ounces of Kahlua. Now, of course, feel free to customize this recipe how you would like. If you don't want to use alcohol, if you want to use different kind of flavors or different kinds of liqueurs, it's very flexible to changing. Okay, and now we want this to be basically at room temperature, which it is because there's so much liquor in it. And that's another thing to point out too, is you don't want to really add in much more liquid than what we have now because we want the gelatin to set up, and sometimes a little bit too much alcohol will prevent gelatin from setting up. Okay, so now we're back on the mixer with the egg whites. And if you remember, I asked you to wipe it out with a little bit of vinegar, and that's to break up any fat residue that may still be in the bowl after washing it, because any little bit of fat can prevent these from whipping up, including egg yolks. That's why I asked you to make sure to separate your egg whites as clean as possible. Now, I know we said we were going to make a chiffon, and by definition, chiffon doesn't have any sugar. But I like to make a meringue whenever I make a chiffon, just with a little bit of sugar, just because it makes a creamier result. It's a little bit stronger, and it holds its volume better, so stronger. But so what you want to do is you want to go ahead and start whipping up your egg whites. And once they start getting a little bit frothy, you want to go ahead and slowly add in your ½ ounce of granulated sugar. Okay, so now that our egg yolks, or egg whites, are a little frothy, go ahead and slowly add in your granulated sugar. And then we're going to go ahead and keep whipping it until it reaches about medium to stiff peaks. Okay, so we're basically at medium to stiff peaks. And because there wasn't as much sugar in this egg whites, it's not as meringue as if you had more sugar in it. But it's still nice and soft and nice and strong. Okay, so the next step is to incorporate all of the remaining ingredients. So basically we're making a mousse. We've got a whipped up egg yolks, we've got whipped up egg whites, we've got whipped cream, lots of air, lots of fluffy ingredients. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of the egg whites to the heavy cream. Then we're going to pour the egg whites and heavy cream back together. And then we're going to fold them together. Okay, and then we're going to switch to the whisk. And then while slowly drizzling in our egg yolk and Kahlua vodka vanilla extract mixture. We're going to slowly whisk it together. Okay, so we lost a good amount of volume because of all the mixing and pouring and combining, but we still remain with a lot of volume. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pour this into our prepared shell. Remember, this is completely cooled off now. You don't want to have it warm, otherwise you're going to destroy all those air cells because it's going to melt, soak into the crust. It's going to be a hot mess. So what you can also do is you can wipe down the crust or paint on the crust a little bit of white chocolate to help prevent the crust from getting soggy from the mousse. But we shouldn't have to worry about that too much because of the high amount of gelatin that's in the mousse. But that's just one more thing you can do to help keep your crust nice and crispy, especially if you're making this ahead of time for like the holidays. And you want to fill this right up to the crust. You don't want to go too much higher than the crust. As you can see, my crust didn't go all the way to the top, so I'm not going to pour all of it. That's pretty good. And now it's pretty much ready to set and rest for 2 hours in the refrigerator until it sets up. Okay, so next I'm going to show you how to make big chocolate curls. Now this step is completely optional. You don't have to do this. I know that sometimes if you're trying to save time, sometimes you just want to buy the chocolate curls or use chocolate shavings or something else. But this is just a neat little trick. It really isn't that difficult and it really doesn't take that much time. But it's just a nice way to jazz up your desserts and your cakes with a very nice, elegant looking decoration. Now I'm using a little over 2 ounces of coating chocolate, and coating chocolate is different from regular chocolate because all the cocoa butter has been replaced with vegetable oil, so we don't have to worry about tempering it, which makes it a little bit easier, but it's not as tasty because it has that weird, vegetable oil texture. It's softer and doesn't have that nice snap to it. Now if you want, of course, you can use tempered chocolate, but this is just a really quick and easy decoration, so if you don't want to fool around with tempering, this is a nice shortcut. You can usually find tempered chocolate at baking and pastry supply shops. You can also find them, they're called candy melts in craft stores, and even the grocery stores now are starting to carry them, and my grocery store calls them chocolate bark. So there's various different names for these. Just look for chocolate and check the back of the ingredients and see if the cocoa butter has been replaced with vegetable oil. It'll say right on the ingredients. So anyway, before this gets too cold, you want to have a piece of parchment paper about a quarter of a sheet pan tall, and you want to have it taped down with a little bit of tape just so it doesn't move or roll up. Now if you have flat-lying parchment paper, like mine comes in a roll, so mine curls up, but if you have flat one, you don't have to tape it down. That's not necessary. So you want to go ahead and pour in your coating chocolate. And I just melted my coating chocolate in the microwave. You don't have to do it over a double boiler. It's not as delicate as real chocolate. Then taking a small offset spatula, go ahead and push it around and make a nice, flat, even layer of chocolate. You don't have to go all the way to the edges, and you can make it a little bit thicker if you want. The thickness is up to you. Just make sure that it's even all the way around. So the next step is to cut the diamond shapes for the curls. Now if you notice, the chocolate isn't nearly as shiny as it used to be. It's got a nice, dull, matte, satin looking finish. Some of the middle parts are still kind of wet because it cools from the outside faster than the inside. But you want to start before it's all completely set because you don't want it to be nice and you don't want it to be all hard. So one of the first things you want to do is you want to cut a square. So you cut up all those uneven edges. Then what you want to do is you want to go ahead and start cutting horizontally in about 1 inch to a ½ inch pieces. Then doing the same thing, cut at a diagonal. I like to start in the middle. Okay, now before it completely sets up, take off the tape. Take another piece of parchment paper, the same size as the other piece of parchment paper you started off with. Turn it on a diagonal. Then taking something that's narrow like a broomstick, I'm using my gum paste rolling pin. Go ahead and roll up your chocolate curls. And the nice thing with working with coating chocolate too is that it doesn't set up as quickly as chocolate does, as tempered chocolate does, so you have a little bit more time to practice and play around with it. Tape it and keep it in the refrigerator. Take out the dowel if you want. And then keep it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it, or until it's set up. And it only takes, I'd say about 10 minutes to set up. Give it a good half an hour if you're concerned about it. But other than that, I'll show you how to take them out once it's all cooled off. Okay, to finish up the pie, I'm going to pipe a bunch of whipped cream rosettes. Now, if you want to showcase the center of the pie more, you can just pipe rosettes around the edge, or a shell border, or whatever. However you want to decorate it, it's fine by you. The turtle pie episode is another example of something that you can decorate however you want. So what I'm going to do is, to pipe a rosette, basically you just want to draw an E, and then an E on top of it to make it a little bit taller. Or you can leave it on the first E to make it shorter. So basically you just want to go around like that. And to make this whipped cream, I just took about a pound of whipped cream and added in about 1/8 of a cup to 1/4 cup of powdered sugar, and then just a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I don't really have a lot of measurements for whipped cream. I just kind of eyeball it and just whip it up to about medium peaks. Remember, you don't want to make it too stiff for your topping, especially since it's going to be chilled and refrigerated. Okay, and so that's the finished piping design. In case you were wondering, I was using an 824 star tip. Alright, and now for our chocolate curls. You remember it's been sitting in the refrigerator pretty much this entire time. They set up a lot faster than that, so you don't really need to leave it in there for that long. And now all you need to do is just pull apart the 2 pieces of parchment paper, and you have your chocolate curls. Now the thicker they are, the stronger they are. The thinner they are, the more delicate, but the more elegant they look. So that's just a way of looking at it. And you can also make them a little bit tighter if you roll it a little bit tighter, but I find that sometimes it's a little hard to get it that tight. So you can see that the finished curl is basically just a diamond. Alright, I'm just going to pretty much just leave it like that. And you can arrange the curls however you want. If you just want to just throw them on there in a very random design, that looks nice too. And like I said, you can use shaved chocolate, or you can grate it, or you can use very small chocolate curls by just taking a vegetable peeler and taking it to a solid block of real chocolate. However you want to decorate it is fine. And the remaining curls, of course, can be stored at room temperature in a plastic bag or a container for use whenever you are ready to use them again. Alright, so that's how you make Kahlua White Russian Pie. Remember that there's a lot of steps included in this recipe, even though it's pretty easy to do. So give yourself a lot of time, especially since you need to chill it and let the gelatin set up. Also, feel free to customize the recipe. You could do a monkey's lunch variation of it by using Kahlua and banana liqueur and give it a nice banana flavor to it, or you can use dark rum. Feel free to experiment using different flavors of alcohol, extracts, and oils. And remember, you can download this recipe from my website, www.theauberginechef.com. I hope you learned a lot today. Thanks for watching, and remember, The Aubergine Chef, demystifying dessert, one recipe at a time.